Hello everybody. Today's video is about the 3 skills that every manager who is working remotely needs to be able to do. These 3 skills make a massive difference to not only your team's ability to get things done, but to your confidence as a manager and a leader. 2020 has plunged many a manager into the world of remote management, and with it has come enormous challenges. Not only have we been dealing with complexity and change, suddenly all the way in which we normally may have led and managed our team changed overnight. And we were plunged into a series of Zoom meetings as we tried to reorganize ourselves. I've been running quite a lot of virtual workshops for one of my corporate clients on remote management, and the common challenges people talk about is how difficult it can be to know what your team are doing, be confident that they're doing the right things, to help them when they need help, and how stressful it can be. And just finding that the boundaries of life and the way in which we worked before, where it was work and home, have become completely blurred. And I think we'd all agree it's not going to change. Even when we're through this COVID crisis, the world of work has changed completely. Now, some industries had quite a lot of flexible remote working already going on. But I think as a trend, it has really increased. I listened to a podcast just recently, and it was on that Masters of Scale podcast. And it was all about somebody who designed offices who talked about the changes that are coming in the workplace. And what they were talking about is offices will increasingly become a place you go to collaborate. And then individual work could increasingly be done anywhere, but obviously a lot more often at home. Therefore, the challenges of remote management, I think, are just here to stay. So it's something really to master. And I think the other thing about remote management that a lot of the people in workshops talk about is it can be seen as a different skill set, but actually I think it's the same skill set as a manager, except everything has to be just so much more intentional. All that happenstance that you may have managed with in the past, all the monitoring of performance that you did by just observing from a distance or having a quick conversation by the coffee machine, has all been removed. And so we have to be much more intentional in the way in which we manage. So I'm going to share with you 3 skill sets that I think make an enormous difference. If you can master these 3, you will be a very able remote manager and indeed, I think, a powerful leader. I've kind of structured it into a framework which I've called CAT. No, not that kind. CAT stands for clarity, alignment, trust. So let me talk about each of those 3 elements and skill sets. Number 1, clarity. Now, clarity means that everybody knows what it is they need to do. You could perhaps think, well, that's easier said than done. But in fact, actually, one of the things I do sometimes is I work as a strategic consultant, and it constantly amuses me, although makes me happy because I earn money doing this, but helping people to define the goal and the scope before we get on to solving the problem. And many a time people want to go, oh yeah, let's move on. We want to get on to solving the problem. But I sort of stand firm and say, no, what is the outcome? What are we aiming for? What is this goal? And what's the scope? And time in, time out, as we do it, it becomes clear that people have slightly different views of what that goal and scope is. And that is because in communication, people take on, may assume things, may have different levels of knowledge, and as a result, they end up with a slightly different picture to the picture you set up. The second thing for managers is we perhaps jump sometimes into quite quickly telling somebody how to do something. And micromanagers are very guilty of this. They'll jump into how they want something done. And sometimes the reason for that is it just takes quite a bit of thinking and rigor of thinking to be clear on what the outcome is. And actually, it's a very different way of managing. If you can describe the outcome, what good look would look like on this particular task, and then say to the person, how do you think it should be done? But if you can get everybody focused on outcomes and have clarity behind that, a lot of the pressure of that, how does something get done, just goes away. And that is, so important. Now, it's really dependent on great communication and recognizing that that clarity is not a thing that you give someone, it's something that you get together. So that great conversation, I'd just like to check we're on the same page, and then seeing if you are, so that everybody is very, very clear on what it is you as a team have to achieve. It's also important because of the level of change that's going on at the moment, driven by all manner of things, depending where you are. But here in the UK, there's a lot of changes through, for example, Brexit, as well as the COVID changes. Things are changing fast. And so what may be a picture 2 months ago may change. And the role of a manager is to translate the organisation's goals and what people are working on, and keeping those priorities very clear. So thinking of yourself as a translator of what needs to be done, and then just making sure that people are clear. So the second step is alignment. Now, alignment is when people are in agreement, or perhaps you have an alliance. But again, you're a team. You've come together, and you know what it is you need to do, and you're aligned to that plan. Now, a lot of the soft alignment approaches you can use, those quick chats by the coffee machine, or the in-meeting discussions and things that happen around the edge, which when you're in physical proximity to each other you can do, have all been removed. And we're all divided by these screens, and indeed often many miles. There are probably 3 moments that you need to think about getting right in your approach. The first is every time you delegate some work, you need to make sure that you're on the same page and the person knows what it is they need to do, but they're with you, they fully understand, and that is through great discussion. The second thing you need to do is to make sure that you have quality one-to-ones. And by one-to-ones, I mean regular structured discussions about work. Now, I did a video just last week on effective one-to-ones. So if you stand at this point and think, actually, I either am not doing regular one-to-ones, what would I put in a regular one-to-one, or I want to just check my one-to-ones are good quality, I really recommend you watching that video, and I'm going to link it so it's the follow-up one to this one. But one-to-ones are so important, and they're also important because people are working, can be quite isolated, and they need that discussion and support and a bit of time where they can just talk about what's going on and ask for help. It's the opportunities for feedback and coaching, so that performance is improved even though you are remote from each other. The third moment to get right, to make sure alignment is really strong, is meetings. So meetings, whether it's one at the beginning of the week to check that everybody's clear, or whether it's on a topic that you're working on and trying to resolve. But making every meeting work is so important. And again, I'm going to do a meetings bootcamp in January, which goes through how to have really successful and effective meetings. So look out for that. But really make sure you're focused on how your meetings are working and that they are effective, and indeed they deliver for everybody. The third step is trust. Now, trust is an interesting thing because you can't make people trust you, and therefore trust is earned. So I think when you're thinking about building trust, I think you have to think about really 2 things. One, things you just do, the behaviors you exhibit that generate trust. Now, I can't tell you how much just regular one-to-ones and those opportunities to talk just one-on-one is a starter for this. But really the behaviours to adopt really are about being open and honest, especially if there is a lot of change going on. And don't feel like you have to have all the answers and reassure people. It is okay in times of change to say things are changing and things are moving, but remember to go back to people, or involve them in the resolution of those problems. So it's really about great communication. The other part that you can do a lot of is empathy. And again, why those one-to-ones are important. Empathy is about really understanding another person. And in times of disruption, it's also about just saying, I hear you and I care. And it isn't taking your team members' problems on, but it is listening and understanding what they may be. People may have all manner of stuff going on, and it's about having open discussion so that people can feel like your team can feel like they can tell you, and it will be constructively received. And another thing that you can obviously do yourself is just do what you say. It's really key. If you don't do what you say and you're not honest, you'll be building very weak foundations, because teams are just slow to follow people they don't trust, and will look for any reason to stand back from it. So if you want full accountability, you need to really work on that. But the other side of trust, and this gets mentioned a lot in the workshops that I run, is people not really 100% trusting their team because they don't know how they are doing things. And so it can kind of breed a narrative of they are, swanning around and watching TV or whatever it is they're going to be doing and not doing their job. And I think you have to really, think about, why do you think this is happening? Why do you feel this? And it comes back to, firstly, if you are clear on outcomes and the individual does that and delivers those, then to some degree it doesn't really matter how it got done, as long as it's done appropriately, obviously. But if you focus on the outcomes and worrying less about how, automatically you are pleased with the work. Having the regular one-to-ones, having those regular discussions, asking the person, how is their kind of time capacity working? How are they finding things? You'll start to get, people will have an honest conversation whether they've got too much work, not enough work, and you can come to some form of agreement on what it is. But it's encouraging the discussion allows you to know whether what that little narrative you had running in your head was right or wrong. And the third thing to do with your team is having a discussion about how we work together. The more you can involve your team in owning what your team is, the better it will be. So one of the things that's often mentioned is that the boundaries between life and work blur. So thinking about how you work, how you communicate, so that you're really efficient on your communication, when you use email, when you use Slack, what gets talked about in meetings, what are the ways that you and they wish to talk to each other. Those boundaries really help say, this is how we work around here, and these similar approaches. The other thing to think about is transparency in your work. So this is where collaborative software platforms really come into their own. But work not being on everybody's individual computer, but in an Asana or a Smartsheet or a Microsoft Teams, so that you move the chat and discussion into much more transparent environments. And what that does is breed accountability, not just between you and your team members, but within the team as a whole. And this can be, again, a really powerful thing where, you want to deliver for the whole team, not just for your managers. So this can really help. And as this is going to be a much longer term way of working, I would really spend this kind of end of year and beginning into next year to kind of, reflect what's working well in the way we work, what's not working well, involve your team. How could we work better together? Because coming up with a solution together, you are much more likely that it will be implemented and used. And your team will sort a lot of these things out for you. You don't need to take all that responsibility on yourself. In summary, the three things that you really need to kind of nail as a remote manager is clarity, that your team are clear of what they need to achieve, that they are aligned behind that, and it's about really making those moments when you come together with either individuals or as a collective work well. And you need to be thinking about ways in which you can constantly build trust between you and your team. And if I was starting anywhere, if you're kind of assessing yourself right now and don't quite know where to start, I would start on clarity. Look at what it is that you think you as a team need to do. And this is great because quite often at end of years, you're kind of resetting where you're going, and get that clear and then in your own head so that you can start communicating clearly and setting very clear expectations going forward. Use the end of the year and the start of the year as an opportunity to renew yours and your team's way of working together. And I am confident that as 2021 progresses, if you keep coming back and keep looking at that performance, the performance of the team as a whole will rise. You will gain more confidence, and also it will allow you to manage stress that comes from not having that. If you found this lesson useful, please subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you get notified of every video that I release. Please also like it. It makes it easier for other people to find. And if you think anybody else you know would find this useful, please share it to them. Also, if you have any comments, put them in the comments below. And if there's anything you'd like me to focus on that's important to you, just let me know. I'd be more than happy to do a YouTube just for you. Well, until next week, I hope you have a good one, and I'll see you then.